Let me tell you a story real quick. Because you see, most bands toil away in obscurity for years before they get their big break. But as soon as Wrath of Logarius put out their debut EP, Necrotic Assimilation, people started talking. Everyone that heard them knew right away, this band sounds different. Why do they sound different? Well, the band describes what they do as formless black metal. And you know, as soon as I heard that, I was intrigued. So I got one of them on to ask them, what is formless black metal? And I also asked them how they're managing to navigate the dilemma of being a band that is in such high demand, but nobody knows who they are. Plus, you'll get to see a man in a mask in some dank dungeon waxing poetic about black metal and death metal on episode 212 of Heavy Metal Philosophy. Wrath from Wrath of Logarius. Welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
Thank you, man.
So I got your press release for the new album, and I saw this phrase, formless black metal. And then I thought, oh, I got to know what this is. What is formless black metal?
So basically, formless black metal kind of comes from the idea of Lovecraftian lore, how they never really clearly describe anything. So you're kind of just constantly trying to figure out what it is. So what we're doing is kind of taking that idea of this constant like shape-shifting creature almost, but turning it into like a genre of music. And we're kind of operating inside the black metal itself. So we're using different types like black and death. There'll be like atmospheric black metal, a bunch of different types that we like to incorporate into, one band really. Because whenever you hear bands, and especially in black metal, they kind of really only try to stick to like one style of it. They'll deviate a little bit, but for the most part, they'll be like a straight up atmospheric band or something,
Yeah. And I listened to the new record coming out April 4th called Crown of Mortis. And before you told me that, I was thinking, okay, well, it must have something to do with their approach to the songs, because I'm hearing chuggy, brutal stuff. And I'm hearing like, really soaring, atmospheric, like post stuff. And then, of course, real evil, tremolo picking stuff. And it's not necessarily verse, chorus. So it seems to me like formless black metal is a multifaceted approach.
Right. Yeah. So we rely heavily on like the death metal influence as well. I'm sure everybody will catch on that right away. But mainly, yeah. That's kind of exactly what's going on. We're just trying to keep it brutal and then try and like sprinkle in all these different types of things.
Very cool. So I was trying to look up information about the band, and it's pretty hard to find.
Right.
I saw that y'all released a single called 1897, and that sort of got you on people's radar. You released the EP, and now you're signed to Season of Mist, and this is your debut record. And you guys, like people that are watching on YouTube, can see that you're covering your face, and on all the videos you got your skulls covering your face. Why the anonymity?
So for us, I feel, well, I guess we all kind of talked about it, and we feel like we want the music to kind of speak 100% for itself. It doesn't really matter who we are or, anything really about us. It's about the end product, the music, So we kind of want to pull ourselves away from it as much as we can and have the band remain as its own entity.
Very cool. So how do you decide, like, okay, we're going to do skulls, or is that just that one video? Maybe the next one you do something different.
So we have talked about doing different things here and there, but kind of remain within the skulls. So the idea kind of came along because the name is after a Bloodborne character from the video game, Martyr Logarius. So one of his like attacks is he shoots these like flying red skulls at you. So we kind of just took that idea and like, let's just turn it into like something we could wear. So we just bought the skull mask and then kind of emulated after that. But it does play in part of the whole anonymity thing as well.
When I first saw it, I thought, well, that's got to be so much easier to manage than having to paint your face every time you play.
Yeah, exactly. Like because I hate like, because I've worn like makeup, on Halloween and stuff like that, and I just hate when it starts running and you get that itch, and then if you touch it, it gets worse. So I just don't want to deal with that at all as well too.
I do concert photography on also, and I've shot the band Gaharia several
Yeah,
times, and
sick.
Three-quarters of the way into their set, those sacks that they're wearing over their face are just soaked, and they're like
Right.
sticking to their face. At least you guys have some air going on underneath those skulls.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, those guys, it seems like they're kind of like almost waterboarding themselves with their own sweat. It's brutal. Like, I don't know if I could do anything like that.
Like I said, I'm listening to the record, and I think it's super cool because in the past, like death metal and black metal really weren't supposed to exist. Black and Death kind of put the kibosh on that a little bit, but still, like for the true cult black metal, you're not really supposed to mix death metal with black metal. So I think the fact that you guys are doing it is super cool. Have you faced any resistance?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see some stuff. People will just be like, "Oh, this is just like brutal death metal." We get some stuff like that, but it's okay. We're kind of since it's like open to interpretation. Just like the books when you read like a Lovecraftian book and it's describing the monster, it's going to be different for everybody. So it's kind of the same idea with the music. Everybody's going to have different ears, so they're going to hear different things and pull different things out of it. So we're fine with it.
Cool. So speaking of the Lovecraftian stuff, did I see that the first EP is sort of a story album, like the lore of the band?
Right. Yeah. So we kind of came up with this idea of necrotic assimilation. It's basically like a virus that would kind of take over people and kind of start just decaying them, turning them into like almost like zombies, but they would just do the bidding of these other creatures that we wrote this huge thing on it. Eventually, I want to try and get it turned into like a comic book or something. That way people can kind of read into it and flesh it out a little better. But yeah, that whole thing's its own like little story, and it'd be cool to kind of write that out one day and kind of go through because each song's like different parts of the story as well. Like the Swarm will be like the invasion, and then Soul Ascension is just like this character kind of like branching up and then coming back down. It all kind of means a bunch of different things.
So is the new record that's coming out this April, Crown of Mortis, is that a continuation of the story, or is this a separate thing?
Well, it's an expansion, but similar to how like you'll have like some movies where like there'll be like two movies going on, and one will be technically a sequel, but they're going on at the same time, like in parallel. So it's kind of like that idea where it's going on around the same time, but there's a few like different side stories, side quests, I guess you could say.
Very cool. I hope you can do the comic book thing because I love storytelling albums in extreme metal because it's like there's this important story, but also I can't understand what you're saying, so it takes me several listens to get the lyrics.
Right. Yeah, and we kind of write stuff a little vague too, so that's also up for a little bit of interpretation too. So it'd be nice to kind of narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, definitely when that comes out, we'll talk about that too. So because the music is so multifaceted, what are some bands that influenced you guys?
So I grew up like a straight up like death metal guy. So listening to like Cannibal Corpse and a lot of like older like thrash stuff. Like I got Chaos AD when I was in like the 4th grade. Yeah. So I've always like that's why this stuff is like super thrashy. All of our stuff is like it always has like thrash parts in it, and that's kind of just like ingrained in my brain from when I was a kid. So yeah, I was really big on like death metal. And then I kind of when Behemoth came out, I was like, oh, this is like crazy because it was like way heavier than regular black metal. And then started getting into stuff like Dark Funeral, and then like Belphegor. And then like later on, like the COVID era, I just went on this like deep dive because I found out about post black metal. I was like, what the hell is this? I've never heard of this before. I found some Australian band called Advent Sorrow, and that band like has like the super like melodic, like very like emotional sounding song. I forget what it's called. It's been a while since I've heard it, but yeah, it was one of their first big videos. Kind of like opened the door. I was like, well, black metal has so much more to offer because I never really checked it out before. I listened to like a lot of the bigger bands and stuff like that, but there's just so much like underneath the surface. You know, you got like super like ambient bands that have like 20-minute long songs called like Alava. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're just like a super like atmospheric, long, drawn out. Like the whole thing's just crazy. Stuff like that. And then there's other bands like Grima where they dress like trees, and they have like this really melodic sounding atmosphere to them as well.
Huh.
I don't know. We kind of pull from everything, basically. Yeah, and even the video games like Bloodborne, every time you fight a boss, it's got this crazy like symphony going on. You always hear these melodies, and that's kind of where we get like a lot of the heavy reverb stuff for our melodies. Kind of want it to sound like a boss battle or some significant time in the video game, you know.
Hmm. So that makes me think of two questions. First is like you say, mostly death metal thrash. So did the other guys go, hey, let's make it black right here? Or has your exploration sort of kind of gotten you there?
Yeah, there's been stuff like that and it's usually pretty easy where you'll kind of like change the picking technique, to tremolo, or you add reverb on it, or you kind of add an extra harmony, or you just add blasting over it, and then you can kind of like nudge it over a little more. So yeah, we've gone through that too, where we've just changed a little bit of the structure, and then it ends up sounding, more black metal than what it did before.
So I too am a death metal, thrash metal guy, but I've got this theory. Longtime listeners will have heard me say this before, but I want to run it by you and see what you think. So my opinion is death metal has a higher floor than black metal. I can hear some real terrible black metal.
Yeah. Right.
But black metal has a much higher ceiling than death metal does. It's really difficult for death metal to reach that level of high art without becoming something that's not death metal. Whereas, like you say, black metal has got so many different acts, which is, it's kind of funny because they have such a reputation for being such sticklers for being true cult, but there's such a wide variety of bands and sounds and art forms in the black metal genre.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the bands I found that was kind of crazy was this band called Abstract Void, and they're like an 80s like synthwave type band with black metal. And like I like listen to that a bunch of times. Like, dude, this is like, it's like there's no limits to what people were doing in like the post black metal world. And they're all completely different, So I was just like, well, you don't really get a lot of that in death metal. It's either it's like super brutal, and then when you pull back a little bit, it ends up turning into like progressive death metal.
Yeah.
And like, but you don't have like that emotional layer that like black metal has,
Yeah, like one of my favorite bands is Rivers of Nile, but they've gotten so progressive. Like, is it still death metal, or is it or is it prog with death growls?
Right. Yeah, it's I feel the same way. Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying.
I've been really getting into black and roll lately. I just think that's the coolest shit ever because it's evil, but it's got that rock and roll like swagger and gravitas, and they can be a little bit silly too because it's rock and roll.
Right. Yeah. Is that like a black metal version of like Black Sabbath or something like that? I haven't heard this genre yet.
I'll have to send it to you, but it's kind of like rockabilly, but it's got like vocals and you instead of being the meme, black metal is just surf with the distortion on. Maybe they turn the distortion off. It's like it's real like. This is a generalization. There's plenty of like serious black and roll bands, but it's like, that Scooby-Doo sort of spooky where it's not really spooky, it's just fun, but also with a little hint of evil. I dig it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm open to it, man. I'll listen to whatever, and I'll probably pull something from it.
Hey, real quick, I need to interrupt the podcast to give a shout out to my friend Eric over at the Heavy Metal 101 podcast. Big thanks for sponsoring this week's episode. I'm going to give Eric the floor for just a moment to introduce himself, and then we will be right back with Wrath of Logarius. We'll finish our interview. One more very important question for Wrath of Logarius, and then, of course, the riff of the week.
Hello, fellow heavy metal philosophy fans. Are you, perchance, Looking for a podcasting deep dive into the history of heavy metal and an opportunity to get to know the stories, the music, and the people who made all of it happen in intimate detail with historical context and with much sarcastic banter? If so, come on by and check out the Heavy Metal 101 podcast. There's nowhere else around where you can have this much fun learning about the history of the music that we all love. Join me, Eric, a university music professor and lifelong metalhead, and Jon, a classical conductor and metal novice, as we explore, discuss, and argue about heavy metal. The Heavy Metal 101 podcast is available everywhere you love to listen to podcasts.
Yeah. So this record comes out on April the 4th. Are there any plans to tour once the record is released?
So we're looking at that stuff, but it's a little difficult since we're a newer band. We haven't really played out too much or at all really. So we're kind of starting at a weird area where we're not technically at the bottom. So we should be able to get on like at least okay shows, but we're gonna try and set that up. I want to say May forward we'll start playing out. So I guess hopefully by summer. But yeah, we'll just have to figure out like where we kind of sit within the scene over here. But chances are, our drummers from Pacific Northwest up in Washington, so we'll probably play up there a lot, and then probably just go down to LA and stuff like that. Maybe a couple shows in the Bay Area. I'm not really sure. There's not a huge black metal scene over here. And then probably just see what happens. But yeah, it's definitely in the pipeline to try and make it out and play this stuff live for sure this year.
Well, the good thing is y'all could probably fit in just as good on a death metal bill too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like we could probably play with death metal and it'd probably be totally okay. Don't have no problem with it.
Hopefully in the relatively near future, get you on the East Coast and I can come see you guys in Atlanta. But that's interesting that you mentioned, because you guys are kind of a new band, and I was trying to do research before our interview. There's between the anonymity and this is your debut record, like it's really hard to find stuff. But
right.
Was that weird? Because you put out a single, most bands like toil away. You put out a single and immediately people are talking. And then after your first EP, you're signed to Season of Mist. Has that sudden attention been weird for you guys?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I haven't had a whole lot of time to like really process it, because we released the EP and that kind of like got a whole bunch of plays on YouTube. And then like a month after it came out, we're kind of like, okay, this is cool. Like, what are we gonna do now? And then the label hits us up. So we're like, oh, geez, okay. And then they ask about a full length. And I was like, well, I kind of did start one already, because I had a couple riffs here and there and some ideas on what I wanted to do. But yeah, from when that all happened till now, it's just like I'm barely like getting some time to kind of like think about it. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. Everything's kind of moved pretty fast, but I don't know. We're keeping up okay. Yeah, it's definitely crazy.
I just, that was interesting when you said, it's like, we're not starting from the bottom, because you got, but you're brand new, so like, it puts you in this weird position where like you're in demand, but you haven't got this history. So you've got to build the history to keep up, to catch up to the demand.
Yeah. And I think with a few good shows, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to pull some stuff off. And I think we'll keep people interested, especially because we're all seasoned musicians. We've been playing for a long time. And then, we won't have a problem at all kind of just showing up and doing the thing,
Very cool. Well, I very much look forward to the record. I can't wait to share it with everybody. And I hope y'all kill it over there on the West Coast so that we can get you over here on the East Coast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Thank you for your time. Wrath of Logarius, Crown of Mortis, April the 4th.
Yep. Thank you.